Good afternoon. So this is a little bit of a look into the future. My name is Scott Beatty. I think everybody here knows who I am. My able assistant is Dan Marinick from the product team. We're going to go through a few PowerPoint slides. I'm hoping there'll be some discussion because some of this is really a look at a future product that we're designing right now. And I'll kind of give you a status on where in the development process we are on that product. Okay, so we'll start with a little bit of kind of history, the purpose, and some of those things, and then we'll get into some specifics on the features you're going to see. And then Dan's got a little demo of some capabilities that I think you'll find interesting. So let me start by just, I guess, being a little bit redundant and repeating some of why we're even talking about this JusticeTech thing. Our goal is to manage all information in a justice enterprise, be it a court or a prosecution office, electronically. We believe that when there's still pieces of paper or parts of it that are in paper, those small parts can have a big impact on productivity. But if you can get everything electronic, kind of the magic happens in an enterprise like this. So that's really the vision of JusticeTech. And when you look at your enterprise, you'll find information falls into three buckets. There's process, and we think of process as these are the rules and routes and stuff. And if you have a paper-based system, most of this information is in people's heads. So it's going home on Friday and drinking a beer. It's going on vacation. It's retiring. So it's basically volatile and it's subject to loss. The other, and it's not necessarily a third, but these are the important pieces. Content. So this is everything besides your data. This is your documents, your videos, your emails, all the stuff that is kind of hard to manage and what OnBase is particularly good at organizing. And then the third kind of completing the circle is the data. So everybody has line of business systems. We have case management systems. These are good at managing data. They index data, they store it, they retrieve it, and they do. When you put all three of these together, you can take your entire enterprise electronic. And again, that's the goal of JusticeTech. So we do that this way. The workflow is covered by OnBase. Take the rules out of people's heads. You've heard a lot about that today. Out of people's heads, configure it in the system, and then it's preserved, it's saved, it's repeated. It doesn't happen. Things don't happen accidentally, or things don't stop happening accidentally. The content, of course, an electronic case file. OnBase is very, very good at that. And the data is typically already in the systems you have. And ImageSoft doesn't typically replace your case management system. We're typically working with and integrating with your case management system. So you can substitute case management system for your records management system if you're in police or whatever line of business systems you're using. Even your finance system, your accounting system, these are where all your data resides. So you add some additional components, which we've been talking about throughout the seminar, true filing, the ability to sign, OnBase is key to that, all these pieces together, and you have now an ability to be 100% electronic. And we've got a few courts, notably the 13th Circuit up in Grand Traverse. Ottawa is very far along this path that are virtually entirely electronic, and they're seeing some of these. In St. Clair, some of you other guys that are in the room have been doing different pockets of this for many years and have gone very far along the path. Okay, so let's talk about JudgeView. That was a little bit just kind of precursor. So who are your judges? I've got does that guy look familiar? They're unique. So what we're building, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the solution here in a second. What we're building is a solution that's uniquely positioned towards a particular type of individual. It's really not just an individual so much as it is the judicial role. So it's the judge and it's his or her assistants and staff that work around them. They can be averse to change, as many of us have seen. They tend to be older. By the time you get to this position, you've got a lot of experience typically. You're not coming out of college going right to be a judge typically. It does happen, but and so they're going to be less technical, but this will change over time. We know that. It's gotten better in the last 5 years. The next 5 years is going to get better till eventually it'll be the internet generation that is in judge seats, and this won't be as big an issue, but it's still something we have to deal with for at least the next 5 to 10 years. We've got a judge in the room, actually a fairly young judge in the room there, and more importantly, they have a heavy workload and they're very time constrained. So whatever we do for the judge, we can't slow them down. In fact, we have to make them more productive. We have to, Steve Galiski likes to say, we have to create a better than paper experience for them. So those are key. They're mobile and they travel and they wear different hats. And I'll talk about kind of some of the places they go and the hats they wear quickly here in a second. There's a lot of collaboration when you talk about judges. There's a lot of people that kind of serve the judge, and then there's, they sit in kind of the hub of a wheel where all these people, from law enforcement to prosecution to the civil litigants to probation, et cetera, are all kind of coming to them and bringing information to them. So they sit in this unique kind of center of the storm, if you will. And probably one of the more important points here that maybe has been overlooked in the past is they're different than clerks. They don't have the same type of role, they don't have the same type of staff, but they've been typically by vendors like us, they've been treated like clerks, and that's been part of the problem. They have been largely ignored by software vendors, and I'm going to actually back up some of these claims with some research that has been done, not just by me, but by people a lot smarter than me in the judge market here in a second. So this solution, this JudgeView solution, which again is a component and part of JusticeTech, I thought it was important to talk about that. We've got more than 15 courts where judges are already interfacing to ImageSoft implemented systems. So it's not new that we're working with judges. What is new is how we're going to work with judges. So judges today are signing, judges today are working from workflow queues, judges today are doing a lot of, are participating in this process. They're looking at electronic case files, but it's kind of hit or miss. We go into one court and half the judges are in this area and half aren't in this area, or there hasn't been legislative initiatives to get these things done. So it's kind of a mixed bag. So this is the area where I was talking about some background research has been done. So I was fortunate to get invited by the National Center for State Courts to be on an ongoing work group that's called the Judicial Tools Work Group. And what this is, so the NCSC guys are the guys that study everything and write reports. Okay, so they're really good at this. They're a bunch of mostly former court folks, some judges, some clerks that kind of retire and then they go work for this national organization, and they do a lot of great research. They write papers, and so this problem was brought to their attention, and Kevin Bowling knew that we were working on JudgeView, and so he was I think he was past NACM president. So he's involved with these folks, and he recommended that I get on he recommended me for the committee, and so I'm on a group, a very prestigious group of about 15 people, and I'm the least prestigious, but there's 3 or 4 very prominent judges from around the country. There's 3 or 4 very prominent clerks, and there's a couple of vendors on it. I'm one of 2, but it's a group that has very intense knowledge, as well as several NCSC folks like Jim Harris, who have a lot of knowledge in this area, kind of facilitating this process. So what we're doing, long story short, we're writing a paper on this exact topic right now. So I've kind of got an inside track on hearing what all these other folks are doing and talking about in their courts. And what I'm telling you about judges is absolutely what people are seeing across the country. It's the same problem. They've been underserved. They've been forced to use clerk solutions, and they've really pushed back. The judges have. So a lot of this is not just me kind of postulating this. It's backed by real judges and if Judge, if you've got input, please, anybody chime in and let me know if you agree or disagree. There is a competing product with this on the market that many of you may have heard of, called Mentis SmartBench. And I think these guys are absolutely on the right track. And they're ahead of us as far as designing and building a solution. They've actually got a very nice case study in Manatee County, Florida. If you ever want to see a video from a judge that talks about this topic, I'm sure all the judges have seen it, but it's just do a Google search for Manatee model, and you'll hear from a Judge Hayworth in Manatee County, Florida, and he's actually one of the judges on this work group committee. So he's in the room talking about his experience. But the point is, Mentis, I think, blazed some trails here, and I give them credit for that. They came up with really the concept, and others were doing it, but they've really productized it, of building a judge-specific solution. And we actually tried to work with Mentis, and we actually are working with them at another account. But I don't think Mentis is going to really work well with an OnBase or a ECM platform, in my opinion, because they got some of their own philosophies on how they should store documents. And basically, the customers they've implemented in the past have not had good document management systems, so they've kind of had to build in their own storage of all the documents. And we can't really get them off that concept that they need to house all these documents. And if they're housing the documents and OnBase is housing the documents, then you're storing them twice. Where is the system of record? How do you reconcile that? So that's our major concern with Mentis, and really has caused us to kind of, I guess, break away from them and go our own direction with this product. So I thought I'd mention that because I think a lot of people have talked to Mentis, and I think there's a great deal of respect for their product. They've done a good job. So the current state of our product, JudgeView, we've done some design work. We've got a product plan and some priorities in place that I'm going to share with you here in a second. We don't have a product, okay? So this is future. We are contracting with a firm that's doing some of the work for us, and Dan's team has been, he had a developer working on it for about 6 months in 2013. So we've done some work, and we've done some kind of prototyping, but we're yet to release a beta copy of this. And we'll talk a little bit more about kind of timing and when we expect to see something that you can put your hands on. So let's talk about the vision and then some of the features that we see are critical to this solution. So high-level vision is to improve productivity and service of the judiciary. And as I said before, it's not just the judge, it's the judicial role. So it's the people, because that's one of the things I've learned through the work group is there are judges that do everything. There are judges that write their own documents and author things and research things, and then there are a lot of judges that do a slice. They're just making the decisions, and they're fed information by assistants and other staff. So this interface needs to work in both modes, where a judge can do everything, or other people are using parts of the interface to feed information to the judge. And we'll talk about some of those ideas in a little more detail in a minute. Don't retread the clerk system. I think that's the one overriding message I heard over and over again is clerks are much more process driven and they do much more repetitive work. So they're much more apt to have a whole bunch of people working off a workflow queue, and judges have a much more diverse world that they live in. So they need to kind of put on different hats and do different things. And there's some significant difference. There certainly is some overlap. They both need a lot of the same data, a lot of the same documents, but they need it presented in different ways. And they need, when you're looking at certain types of cases, judges just need to see different information. And they need to see it faster. They can't click, click, click to see the information because they don't have time. They're more on the treadmill, especially when they're in a courtroom environment. We have to respect the roles and environment. We'll talk more about that. It's important from our perspective to leverage existing tools. There's no need to reinvent document management systems. There's no need to reinvent all your case management systems to serve these folks. They really just need to get information from those systems, and that's important. All right, so let's talk about some of the more specifics. So we're kind of getting it down to the rubber meeting the road here. The overriding view of this interface, this product, JudgeView, is it's one interface bringing together three sets of data. okay, or information. It's bringing together data from the CMS, the case management system. It's bringing together data from the electronic content management system, so this is OnBase, or if you're not using OnBase, whatever repository you're using to store documents, okay? And then there is some data that is judicial only, so you almost need a little bit of judicial case management, so there's data in fields that the judge or the judicial role keeps track of that that the clerk office in particular doesn't know about, doesn't care about, and in fact legally shouldn't be seeing. So that data is important and we need to respect that. But it's one interface that's going to bring all that data together seamlessly so that the judge doesn't really know or care where it's coming from. I just need it. I'm working on this type of case, it's a civil case, and I need data to look like this. And I need to always find my documents by clicking here, and there they are. And I need my case file organized in this way for this type of case, that sort of thing. Judges are mobile. And if you saw Dan's presentation, he talked about, judges work in a courtroom. I'll talk a little bit about some of their different roles, but they work in a courtroom, they work in chambers, they work at home, they work in the hallway. They're constantly moving around and doing things kind of in motion. Not all judges, but a lot of judges. As I mentioned, they collaborate a lot. We mentioned that already. They're overworked, probably underpaid too, right, Paul? And probably more importantly, the work modes, and this is some of the stuff, and some of it's pretty obvious, especially to judges, but to us more techie folks, this is interesting. Really, the modes that judges commonly participate in, and there's going to be deviations from this, but and they need to be thought through. There's the multi-event cases, so these are the bigger cases, trial court cases where there's event after event, there's day after day, maybe in the same courtroom, or you adjourn and come back, those type of cases. There's the single event cases, these are traffic, these are things like that where you're really processing conscious and you're getting through a whole list of things. They do work from queues, so there's a fair amount of queue-driven work, and some of our judges use this today, where they'll just get everything that's supposed to be signed by the judge will appear in a single queue, so that the judge can go to that queue in their free time, at home, in chambers, and just work the queue down. So they do work that way. Some judges author, so they're writing documents, they're writing opinions from scratch, from templates, etc. And then this was a little bit unique to our way of thinking, and it's something we really haven't done a lot with before, but there's a fair amount, especially, we do now a fair amount of appellate work. There's a fair amount of research and note-taking going on, and this is where sometimes the research is being done by completely different groups of people, but it needs to all kind of contribute to the same case file. And this is some of that data that's probably being captured that is not, the clerk's office doesn't see, it's judge information. And we're going to talk a little bit about advanced note-taking, so it's annotating documents, it's taking side notes, and how do you really do that now that you've got an electronic world? There are ways, and we can make it better than writing in the margin of a piece of paper, or highlighting with a yellow highlighter on a piece of paper, or writing on the jacket of the case file, which is commonly ways it's done today. And then most judges are keeping handwritten notes somewhere else, or they're keying them into, in the best case, some note-taking tool, and they're kind of disconnected from the case. And so we want this data to be attached to the case, but also secure. So if the judge has, for my eyes only notes, they're always for his eyes or her eyes only, and they're never able to be seen, they're never able to be discovered, things like that. Any questions so far? Okay. So getting closer to a real product here. We've organized the features kind of into two categories. Priority 1 features, these are features we plan to implement in the first beta and alpha versions of the product. So whatever we release we expect to contain these features. It's got to show you case information. It's got to show you case activity. So this is register of action or docket information. It's obviously got to show you documents. It's got to have some integration to the calendar and the schedule, both your personal calendar. We'll talk more about the calendar in a second. annotations and notes, folder view, electronic signature, and a new concept called Tether to PC, and we'll talk more about that in a second. Priority 2 are a little more advanced features. I won't read them all, but getting into more, this concept of snippets is kind of interesting, and it was introduced by some other companies had done this, but the ability to kind of take a document and grab a piece of it and say, I'm going to kind of tear this away from this document, but maintain some linkage to it and be able to comment on that outside of this document. So paragraph 1 of this, pull it over here and write some comments around it or annotations and separate it from the document, but also maintain its linkage so that you could get back to the source if you had to. That's the concept of snippets. So here's some new stuff. Platform strategy. Our phase 1 is targeting the iPad. So all the Windows PC folks or Windows tablet folks probably just went, oh. So we're doing this, once we get it, if you let me finish and get through kind of the tethering to PC and cover some of the concepts of how we think we can make the iPad actually work for this role, then maybe we can have a discussion about it. So what are the pros of the iPad? Everybody's using an iPad. So I don't even ask that question anymore. I know everybody's using an iPad. If you haven't, you've used an iPhone, and it's just a smaller version of the same interface. The iPad is dominant market share-wise. A lot of judges, and there's been some studies done by some of the judge conferences, a lot of the judges are already using iPads, like a high percentage, a surprising percentage. I think mainly because they fit right in the demographic that Apple is going after, which are educated folks that are maybe tired of using complicated interfaces and want something simpler, more intuitive. So that fits, the judges tend to fit right into that demographic. It's extremely easy to use the iPad, and this is really these last 2 points are really if Steve Jobs were here today, those would be the 2 kind of leading points he was going after. Was it's got to be easy to use and it's got to be mobile, because he could see this mobile revolution coming that David Behan talked about, and it's here. But the ease of use is interesting because what it causes is very simple interfaces, right? If you use an iPad, sometimes you might get frustrated and go, it's good, but it's missing, it's not my Outlook. It's missing all these hundreds of other features. And that's by design. The iPad is supposed to be missing all those complicating features because that makes simplicity and that makes it uncomplicated and easy to use. No one has ever read a training manual, I guarantee it, from an iPad. I'm not sure it even exists, right? You don't need it. You push the button, it starts up, you say, oh, swipe, and off you go. And that's the way this interface is going to be. So in an iPad world, because Apple controls all the apps that get in the App Store, and they won't let you put an app in the App Store that doesn't meet Apple standards, which are simple. So the point is, you get one screen of data at a time. You don't have windows floating all over the place like I love in Windows, but a lot of people hate in Windows, like my mom. If I had a nickel for every time she called me and said, the window just disappeared. No, Mom, it's right behind. Remember we talked about this. It's right behind the other window. Well, you don't have that problem so much with iPads because they've solved that by not allowing that feature to really overlay Windows. And so that's the kind of the pros of an iPad. The cons, and I've kind of touched on them a little bit, it is a very limited interface. It's 9 inches, okay, and it can only do so many things. You can't add very sophisticated menus and pull downs and stuff. We think that's good, and Steve Jobs thought that was good, and I think that's why the iPad has really gotten such widespread adoption. Now, don't get me wrong, I am still a big-time PC proponent. I love the latest features in OnBase that only work in the Unity client, which is built for Windows, and that has a place. Okay, I'm not in any way suggesting that all the work we've done over the years on the Windows platform is going to be undone. But for this interface, we think it makes sense, and we've kind of got a solution, we think, for the for the judge that needs to do more than what that simple interface can do. And we'll talk about that here in a second. Another con, it says not Windows, but the point there is the tools that we can use for this are a bit more limited. So we're going to have to build a lot of this from scratch because there's not the same tools that are available on the Windows platform. There's a lot of better tools, and there's a lot of missing tools. So desktop tethering. This is probably, we think, one of the kind of game changer or a way that makes the iPad actually work for a judge in their varied roles. So what we're talking about here is if you're, and I just mocked up a very crude iPad screen here just so you get the idea. It's not anything like what a screen would look like, but yeah, that's my design skills right there. Press a button, and you'll be able to. The concept here is you're going to be able to use your iPad in conjunction with your Windows desktop. Okay, so what does that mean? There are some things that are really well done on the Windows desktop. If I want to look at a big case file and I've got all the color-coded tabs and all the fancy organizational tools that OnBase offers, that's a good thing to see on the PC. If I want to see the whole case file laid out, go to the PC. If I want to write a Word document, has anybody tried to author a document on an iPad? Or worse yet, an iPhone? It is brutally difficult. The interface is not meant for data entry. That's the problem. Even if you put a keyboard on it, it's still not very good at it. So I would contend that for most data authoring, especially something you're doing repetitively, you're going to want to use the Windows PC for that. Or it could theoretically be a Mac PC as well. So when I say PC, I'm interchanging. Most of it's Windows today, but I think you're going to see more and more Mac OS stuff coming out of vendors like Highland. So and here's the kind of key point. When I say tether, it's not we're not wiring these two devices together. It's electronic tethering. So you just have to be in proximity to another. It's probably going to work over your network is what we think. It could work through Bluetooth, but there's probably no need to because both devices are likely to be on the same wireless network. So the idea is you'll be able to walk in your chambers, for example, if you're the judge. You're carrying your iPad with you everywhere. It's under your arm wherever you go. And when you go to your chambers, you can dock your iPad, and it will automatically sense your location. And all this technology, by the way, is in the iPad today. It'll sense your location and allow you to log into your desktop. And now the two can work together. And here's the key piece of functionality that OnBase offers that makes this possible. OnBase offers, everybody's heard of the product called Application Enabler. Great little tool that lets us basically launch from other applications and do things in OnBase. You can do a whole handful of different things. App Enabler has an API that we can leverage. So essentially what I can do is I can build this bridge to tether these two devices without having to write almost any code on the Windows PC. It's already there in OnBase. So things are there like viewing a document, viewing a folder, running a custom query, so a specific search for documents. So imagine you're looking at a case and we could have a button on there that says, show me all the orders. Boom, that's a custom query. So the point is, us and customers could integrate different features with that tethering concept without having to write any code. You would just use Application Enabler and connect the two together, and that feature would suddenly be available from the iPad. You can also do things like launch an e-form, which is very important. Create a document from a template, so that there's that authoring concept. You can view what's in a workflow queue. You can run a script. Now that's not to say that the iPad is not going to do a lot of these features too. It's just when you need to get into a different mode where you're doing maybe a lot of keyboard work, it may make more sense to tether to your PC and use the Unity client for that type of work. Make sense? How are we doing on time? Plenty? And I just listed some other kind of key areas that we're going to do some integration work early on. And I talked briefly about this, but I thought it bore a little more detail. The calendaring, there's really calendaring from a couple different perspectives. The judge obviously could have a personal calendar. The courtroom could have a calendar. The cases or the judge has a calendar maybe from the court's perspective. So there's a very complex calendaring challenge to solve for judges because they deal with both things that need to be scheduled, people that need to be scheduled. They also, their staff often, and again, the role often needs to find a slot for an event, right? You need to, okay, we're going to schedule this hearing. Let's find the next available slot. Well, that might be a fairly complicated search, and that's a capability that we see in this product. You'll be able to find a slot based on multiple dimensions of calendars being integrated together. I just mentioned that one. Being able to notify, we often hear requirements where the calendaring needs to keep outside parties engaged. If you sat in the true filing, you see how we've got some great features built into our products for e-notification. The calendaring for judges can do the same thing where, okay, we need to move that, maybe a party can't make it. How do we let everybody know? That can be automated through a lot of the tools. And one of the real, I think, advantages once you get to an entirely electronic world, especially where cases are being filed electronically through true filing, is pushing out, and places around the country have done this, through e-filing allow participants in a case to actually schedule things directly without having to go through people. So we will have all this data. It's just a matter of building out the interfaces in true filing. So if you're in the middle of a proceeding or your complaint got a case assigned to it, okay, I got to schedule a hearing. Maybe I, as a participant, I can ask for that hearing on these range of dates, and the system can come back and say, okay, here's the slots that are open, and let that automatically be scheduled without. I know it sounds a little maybe crazy and wacky and a little out there, but it's possible with all the data being available. And just some other things that kind of wrap up here, and then we'll show you a little bit of some ideas on how it might look. And this is one, we've had conversations, and we've actually got some customers. I know Ottawa has done something, Genesee has done some things, or Ingham has done some things, where the iPad can be used as a tool to allow remote interaction with the court. So if you've got this thing, it's wireless, right? Everybody's got wireless in their home. You've got nice VPN connections from technology at work. The judge can take this thing, and the mobility transcends, the network, right? It transcends out through the internet, through VPN technology, so it can be very secure. But you can be sitting at home, and a judge on call could be interacting with law enforcement for blood warrants, emergency warrants, different things like that, personal protection stuff. All the things that we do now more manually can be done electronically, including capabilities to have more advanced multimedia connections. Think Skype through for swearing in of warrants and things like that, so that people can, if you got an officer and they're asking for a warrant and you want to talk to them, why couldn't that be, through a video connection that's all done over the internet instead of picking up the phone? Just some little things that we're kind of thinking about from a advanced collaboration perspective. Searching is going to be very important. The ability, and we've heard this over and over again, what we probably don't do as good a job today as we could in the future, or as we will in the future, is, and I think Dan talked about it a little bit in his session, is when you're looking at a case, how do we look in very creative ways, maybe for what this person might have done previously, right? Especially when you consider things like they've got aliases, there's all these factors that are designed to defeat our ability to find the link between this crime and the crime they did before. With a lot of the data we're capturing here, and maybe a little bit more demographic data, there is some capabilities, and I think you're going to see this in the future where our technology, and Bill Premer talked about it this morning, where information kind of comes to you instead of you going to it. Where the software could go, let's say it's a criminal case, it's a big case, it's a big felony or something. The software could go and research for you and let's find every place where, a white male 5'8" with a tattoo on his arm, if we've got that data, committed something similar. Forget the name, because we know that might not be right, or the address. And wouldn't that research be valuable? And so we kind of view some, and this is a little bit kind of out there, but those types of searches could be presented through a judge interface, where judges could, and judge assistants and folks in the judicial role could do those sort of searches, let alone the real canned searches like lien searches and things like that that are already available. One of the things, and just last point on this slide, is, so you've got, one of the things, and Dan has talked a lot about this when him and I have chatted about this, a judge is often, he likes to use the analogy, kind of Monday Night Football, the play-by-play guys. Al Michaels sits up there and he looks all smart. He looks like he knows all the players on the field. He knows that the guy just got taken on an ambulance, but we all know he doesn't really know all that. He's just the mouthpiece, and data is flowing through other people to him in his ear, on his monitor. This interface could serve some of that same role. So you could have, if you think about when a judge is, particularly when they're sitting in court, particularly when they're sitting on a kind of single event docket where they're working through things very quickly, he could have a dialogue going. And when I say a dialogue, it could be video, it could be a text stream with the cashier, it could be a video feed of the lobby just to see how crowded we are there. It could be judicial assistants in the background just doing things to make the judge look smart. The judge could be working a case that's fairly complex, an asbestos case or something. And they could be researching it and saying, hey, judge, why don't you ask, or why don't you make this point? Or, that's the sort of thing we see with the technology's all there, but we see that, and it's kind of advanced, it's a little bit out there, but this ability to allow the judge to really play their role more effectively with the other supporting people kind of playing maybe a more intimate role in that environment. So those are some of the ideas we've got. I'm talking a lot. Any comments, questions? Am I crazy? All right. So I'll close with this, and then Dan will give us a quick demo, and then we'll probably get you out of here a little early. So our next steps, we're still in the planning phases, so we're pretty tight on prioritizing features, but we'd love to have feedback. We've got some judges that we've spoken with already. We're going to be building a user committee. It was something we were going to actually do in the fourth quarter last year, but we've pushed it a little bit. We're going to be doing it in the next few months. So I'll be reaching out to folks if you know a particular judge that you think would be valuable, who's maybe not intimidated by technology, has some good ideas. They don't have to love technology, but they have to not hate it probably to be valuable to this. So we're going to hold some meetings with this group and try to, I'm hoping for a group of maybe 10 to 12 folks. They don't have to be judges. They can be folks that are just assistants or knowledgeable on the role. So our task, finalizing the features and roadmap and build that initial prototype. Our plan is to with some of the committee members to be able to kind of hand out an iPad, give it to them to use for a while, that'll have kind of a little bit of a hard-coded interface that won't necessarily talk to a real court, but it'll give them a taste of how things will work to give us some feedback. And then once we get past that, we're going to build a beta product which will connect it'll probably be for 1 or 2 specific courts. So it will connect directly to live documents and live data that we can put out in the field and get some more feedback. Timing on this, we should have the committee and the planning done easily this year. We will have probably a prototype, I'm hoping sometime in the fourth quarter of this year. So this isn't years away, this is imminent.
It starts as a sort of a sanity check for what we want to create and how we see people using it. And Highland does a great job of building like the Unity client and building all their different clients, and their mobile app is very good as well. In fact, there are some judges that are using this right now in production for our California because they prefer using the iPad and the device. So even with all of the different features that are available and the limitedness of what is on the OnBase mobile app, they're still viewing that as a, they're validating, I guess, what we're coming up with, which is, give me something that's much easier to use, that I can take with me, that I can use from home, on vacation, in chambers, whatever. But obviously we can't fault Highland for what they built, because what they built is for the general populace. I mean, they are catering to an adjudicator all the way to a healthcare provider to our judges. And so, some of the things that you see with the UI is a very, bland look with, here are my cues, here are my documents, and I can go through and, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with the viewer and being able to view it and being able to do things like ad hoc tasks, viewing party data, even signing the documents, being able to view the related. It's all great features. And they're things that we know that we're going to have to put into our product. And so we're still getting some of that feedback already based on what people like to see in this. But specifically what I want to show is the centering around notes. Because I think notes are probably the key piece from what we've heard over and over again with judges. I mean, no judge that we have seen has ever not had the pen in their hand marking up or writing on the documents as they're doing things. I'm not sure how much you're marking or annotating or writing on the actual documents themselves, but the idea is that through the OnBase app, to add a new note, it's really more about typing. And so one of the tenets of what we actually want to do is to try to alleviate the typing, because if I want to say, I know the person, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of typing that needs to go on, and it's not very intuitive. It's certainly not quick, and it's not how a judge is typically using things. So one of the biggest things that we're looking at are alternative ways to being able to display content, and especially being able to quickly get those types of notes. And again, what Steve Gliski said, what Scott was saying before is, something that's a better than paper experience. So most devices now have the thing that simulates, your finger now. So having the pencil or the pen that is the stylus, this allows somebody to not have to use their finger. But what's important about it is that not only can I do that, but, through the ability to, zone in on a particular area, we want to be able to say, that they can write now something that looks more to how they actually work. And the idea is to get them something that when a judge is actually doing it, this looks very much like they would if they were to be using on paper. The chicken scratch that everybody in this room has when they're writing their own stuff. I can't read what Scott writes. It's almost impossible for me to read it. But Scott can clearly read it. And the idea of, that looks like probably chicken scratch to everybody else, but it's that looks like my writing up there. That's what I'm comfortable with. That's how I like to annotate. And what we want to do is provide an experience for the judges that simulate that. So they do have the adoption rate, and they actually want to use this in the way that it is. So if they want to actually mark up a document and have it the way that they want and be able to, key line or red line or do whatever types of annotations, that it's something that's in a much easier to use format and something that allows them to use things like stylus pens over their fingers and not have to worry about a keyboard or any type of interaction. Is there any questions on any of the stuff, I guess? That's pretty much from a nutshell, sort of the paradigm of what we're looking at. I think, the biggest thing for us is always going to be around the mobility side of it. We have spent some time gathering those requirements, watching how judges work. One of the things that I took as a takeaway, and Scott talked about it, so I'll reiterate it though, is You know, when you really look in a courtroom, a judge is standing or sitting sort of by themselves, but they're always, you know, when they're saying you're going to be going to drug, you know, rehab, and I'm going to order you to pay blah, 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 and there's a bond, there's always somebody typically behind the scenes that's pulling a piece of paper, filling out that document, and then handing it to the judge to sign. And so they're constantly in a state of grabbing paper, signing that document, and handing it back. And one of the things that we want to do with the user interface is allow them to have, through that long-term solution, is to have somebody like a clerk be able to create that document. That document may be created out of the Unity client, maybe be created on a different iPad device, but to be able to push it. Because we have that two-way communication, now the document can actually be pushed right to the judge. The judge could either use TrueSign or anything like that, or they could just sign the document like they normally would and have it as a real signature as they're actually doing it. And so the key piece is to have that two-way communication built in automatically in there, but to not have to have the judge on an island. Because what we don't want to have happen is where the judge is in front of somebody saying that there's going to be an order or a bond, setting the bond, changing their mind at the very last second because they're being belligerent, and then so they up it by, you know, instead of $2,500, they do, fine, $25,000. You want to keep talking? You know, but behind the scenes, it's somebody ripping up a piece of paper and then re-adding and then sending it over. Judge just wants to be able to sign it immediately. The other part with that is, it doesn't matter how structured a day is. When you look at that laundry list of work items that are sitting out there in the on-base queue, there may be a beautiful docket that's sitting there. And you can chronologically go in order, and a judge may be chronologically going in order in that, and saying, okay, next is up is blah, blah, blah. But if somebody could push that information as to which the next case is, that's key. But it really becomes important when there's that emergency warrant request that comes in. I guarantee that if you're on, you know, judge on duty, you might be in a cattle call where you might be going through misdemeanor after this, and persons, you know, having a hearing, blah, blah, blah. And unless you're in a trial where there's a jury, at any moment, some sheriff could just walk right in and say, we need to have this emergency blood warrant request, or we need to have this thing signed, we got him in custody, we don't want to put him out there, can you sign it? And they might stop what's going on. Well, again, in a paper world, that's pretty easy. Prosecutor or, you know, somebody might, you know, hand the documents to them. But when it's in a digital world, again, being able to push that content so it immediately appears on the screen, they can actually sign it electronically and then complete it and get it off of it to be able to have that interruption between there. So that's a lot of the sort of the tenets of what we're actually looking for. The thing that we want to try to keep in mind is going to be what other people have sort of designed as far as those like hints and gestures. Those are key pieces. And so we're doing a lot. We're slow at doing it because we want to be diligent about making sure that we keep those paradigms. So we even anticipate having that, because I know what you're talking about with USA Today. It almost has like a line, and it shows you a snippet of what that next article is going to be. And then you know now that, oh, there's another article, I can swipe through it. So having other documents that are actually there and knowing that those other documents are there. The question is what is, and that's why I want to get a prototype into people's hands as soon as possible, because what's the natural thing that they're going to do? Because is it a two-finger swipe to move versus, you know, one finger to actually do an annotation? You know, what is the actual way to sort of start that through some sort of gesture? Because those things are stuff that other people have already started on and have sort of trailblazed with. And what we don't want to have is exactly what you see with, you know, even the on-base one. And I don't want to throw it underneath the, you know, whatever. But, you know, to have to go through the menu option and start clicking, you know, the virtual clicking by touching all these different options. There's a better way through gestures. The question is what gestures are the ones that are sort of the de facto? Because it gets back to the point that why we chose the iPad is we want to make it so obvious that you don't need any documentation, and you can't, it's hard to fail at doing what you need to do. And again, that's also why the tethering part is kind of key too, because, you know, a judge typically, even when they're asking or talking about something, their assistants, their clerks, they know what the judge is thinking. They've been working with them for so long that they just know that when the judge starts saying this, they're going to want to see this document, and so they'll start reshuffling things and then hand them that document. And that's sort of the symbiotic relationship that those two have, you know, or that team has, and that's why we don't want to break it. And not to throw Mentis and that Manatee model out the window, but one of their pitching points has always been that they're a hermetically sealed, you know, device that the whole world could collapse around you and you've got everything at your fingertips. Well, you're on an island though. I mean, as a judge, because it's so sealed, nobody can poke into there to give you anything, and you can't get out of there to sort of update what's going on. And our philosophy is it's a live system. You've got internet connectivity. And if your data center goes down, or if your electricity goes down, chances are you're not even going to be able to flush toilets or do anything to even have your court open. So the chances of having a catastrophe where you need that closed system don't necessarily outweigh the downside of now duplicated data and also living on an island. Nobody can help that person as they're actually doing the work. Thank you.